Liz Cheney, chair of the House GOP conference and member of the House Armed Services Committee. She joins us from Capitol Hill. Good morning to you, Congresswoman.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. How are you guys this morning?
We're doing okay, but you know what, Ms. Cheney, for the last couple of weeks we've been starting the show and there's all this trouble on America's streets, and the president has made the offer, look, if you guys can't handle it, I'll send people in. And he has sent people to Portland, completely legal, as we have heard from various authorities. And now he's made it very clear he'd like to send some people to Chicago, maybe New York City. What's the problem with taking the federal government's help if they can't get a handle on the trouble?
Well, I think that it is absolutely incumbent on these local officials to take the help. I mean, when we are seeing people killed every single night in America's cities, when we are seeing communities that aren't safe, and these leaders of these communities, and unfortunately it tends to be mostly Democrat leaders, mostly leaders who've been willing to put up with rioting, who don't seem to know the difference between rioting and protests, and who simply seem not to be able to keep their communities safe. President Trump's going to keep those communities safe, and I think it's very important that we do so, and I support his efforts. I'm glad that he's going to be making another announcement this afternoon.
Okay, we want to ask you about what Matt Gaetz said, and he's calling on you to resign. This is what Politico is reporting, that some Republicans are upset with you because you were backing the primary opponent of Representative Thomas Mazie, and it all came to blow during a conference meeting on yesterday. What's your response to that? Do you plan to step down because he's calling you to?
Well, listen, we have a wide range of views within our conference. We had a healthy discussion about a whole range of issues. But our conference meeting yesterday, which you have not seen the press report on, is the fact that the conference meeting yesterday opened with and was focused on what America will look like if Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are running this country, and how important it is for us all to be unified against that. If they are allowed to win, if they run this country, you will see taxpayer-funded illegal immigrant health care. You will see taxpayer-funded abortion. We've watched just over the last few weeks, they've put bills on the floor in the House of Representatives that will make it harder for us to develop vaccines and therapeutics to fight COVID. We're going to watch today. They're going to put a bill on the floor that would have prevented President Trump from banning travel from China at the beginning of this pandemic. So we're focused on that. We know that, Joe Biden is in his basement because he can't make it through an interview, but also because he doesn't want to have to defend his socialist policies. So you may see the Republicans have discussions and debates. We believe in free speech, but we are all unified in ensuring that come November, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are not running this country.
Congresswoman, though, Congressman Gaetz was really pretty direct in his criticism of you in not supporting President Trump in some of his policies. Would you like to address directly that criticism of lacking support for President Trump?
Well, look, my voting record with President Trump is something like 97% of the time. There are areas, they tend to be on national security, where we don't always agree. I find in my experience the president appreciates people who are direct, people who explain what they think. But I think most of the time, far more of the time, we agree than we disagree. And when it comes to national security, when it comes to the importance of keeping this nation safe, I look, for example, at China, which is our largest national security threat right now. And the fact that President Trump, Secretary Pompeo have taken hugely important steps to hold China accountable, to combat the fact that China has spread the coronavirus globally. The government of China is responsible for the devastation that we faced, and that is a stark contrast to Nancy Pelosi, who even yesterday refused once again to say she would hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for this. You saw strong action yesterday with the administration saying we're going to close the consulate in Houston. So there's no comparison in terms of the kind of leadership that we need in the world. And the choice is a very clear one. The American people are going to have to choose between a world in which the United States and the other free nations set the rules of the road, or a world in which China and Russia and our adversaries who do not believe in freedom set the rules of the road. That is the world that you will see under a Joe Biden presidency, if Nancy Pelosi remains Speaker, and God forbid if Chuck Schumer is able to be the majority leader in the Senate. So we are all going to work together to stop that.
Well, just one final question about this, this inter-party squabble behind closed doors yesterday, which has been widely reported in the Washington papers now. You know, you must have seen the fact that during the primary season, when you endorsed Tom Massey's primary opponent, you were going to get some blowback, and you got some yesterday. But according to something I read in Politico today, you know, Jim Jordan was yelling at you. All these people were yelling at you. What do you attribute the hostility toward you? Where's it come from? I know at one point Leader McCarthy said, look, we are honored to have her as our conference chair. But where does that all come from?
Well, look, Steve, first of all, Thomas Massey and I had a nice long talk yesterday. We're in a good place. I made the point, actually, that President Trump was harder on Thomas Massey than I was. But I think that, you know, as I said, we have a different set of differing opinions in our conference. I think that's a good thing. I think that if you look, for example, at what the Democrats do, you have a situation where, you know, they believe in the cancel culture. They're trying to ensure that only people who believe a certain set of things are allowed to speak. They want to erase our history. And I think on our side of the aisle, it's a healthy thing for us to have those kinds of debates and discussions. I'm sure we'll have more as things go along. But the fundamental point here is that we're unified in making sure that President Trump is reelected in November, that Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker, that we take back the majority in the House, and that we ensure that we hold the majority in the Senate. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the set of accomplishments that we have had, holding China accountable, Operation Warp Speed, the work that the House Republicans have been able to do with the White House, with President Trump, and with this administration to make sure that we are moving as quickly as possible to develop vaccines and therapeutics to help this country recover, to get the economy open again, there's no comparison. And so I'm very confident that we all will come together on the big issues that matter the most come November.
Okay. So, Congresswoman, let me just press you one more time on this, because you have so much experience. Not only was your father the vice president, and you watched and learned so much from him. You have the third most senior GOP role. And then Matt Gaetz, who's a rising star in the Republican Party, who is in your party, and most Republicans would want y'all to unite. And he's calling for you to step down. What is your message to him and Congressman Jordan this morning?
Look, I've been pretty clear, Ainsley, that we've had a number of different discussions. We'll continue to have those discussions. I think it's healthy that we can have those discussions. But when you look at the challenges that we face going forward, when you look at where we've got to get as a party, when you look at the extent to which the difference between President Trump victory in November and a Joe Biden victory in November could not be starker. We're talking about, you know, Joe Biden, for the first time in history, has allowed the person who lost the primary to help him as a co-equal partner to form his policy committees. So there is absolutely no debate about the extent to which we've got to make sure socialism doesn't take hold. We've got to make sure we have a leader who's going to keep our country safe, who's going to hold China accountable, who's going to ensure that we can get out of this pandemic and that we can, frankly, get the economy back growing again. And so whether or not we have debates and discussions internally, as I'm sure we will continue to do, we are going to be absolutely united going forward on the big issues, and I'm not going anyplace.
Okay. Congresswoman, let me just quickly, you mentioned the closure of the Chinese Communist Party's consulate in Houston. That's getting a lot of reaction this morning. China complaining overnight, and Morgan Ortagus, the State Department spokeswoman, putting out a statement simply saying that the United States won't tolerate the PRC's violations of our sovereignty and intimidation. This, as the Secretary of State, Pompeo is calling for an international coalition against the CCP. Your reaction this morning?
Listen, I think this is the latest example of the extent to which this administration has taken very important steps to hold China accountable. There's no question the Chinese Communist Party has for decades, and you know, I think parties, both of our parties, when they were in power, got China wrong for 20 years, thinking that if we simply opened up to them economically, that they would become a responsible member of the community of nations. They have not done that. They have, in fact, been at war with us in many ways. Whether you're talking about espionage, whether you're talking about what they've done in the South China Sea, whether you're talking about stealing our intellectual property, whether you're talking about the extent to which we've seen hacks into our personnel systems and other places, the Chinese Communist Party has got to be held accountable. We just passed the National Defense Authorization Act yesterday here in the House that had important resources in it to do just that, to help to build the defense initiative in the South China Sea, funding for nuclear modernization that's crucially important to make sure sure that we can maintain our superiority. So it is a very important sign that we are seeing steps like this one, steps like the president's sanctions against the people in the government of China who were responsible for the Uyghurs and the concentration camps, as well as for what's gone on in Hong Kong. The world has got to hold China accountable, and the Chinese Communist Party has to realize that we are going to hold them accountable, that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated. So I think it's an important step, and it's a step that I support.
We should probably also point out there was a banner that talked about a fire at the consulate. Just apparently somebody called the fire department yesterday, and it turns out the Chinese people at the consulate were burning all the documents. So
yeah,
I'm
right.
sure that's just a coincidence to the fact.
A good sign that they're trying to hide something, I'd say.
Do you think? Okay.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, you guys. Great to be with you.